You're listening to episode 763 of a VerySpatial podcast, June 22nd, 2025. Hello and welcome to our VerySpatial podcast. I'm Jesse.
I'm Sue.
I'm Barb.
And this is Frank.
And this week we're going to be talking to Zach Jaffe of Map IT. But first, of course, we have some news. First up, there were a couple of executive orders that came out of the United States, the White House, that are focused on small unmanned aerial systems and just unmanned aerial systems in general. One of them is focused on security of the airspace and making sure that drones are incorporated into that a little bit more. Don't really go into details because there's lots of them, but perhaps the more important one was one that was already on the table, but is now getting fast-tracked significantly, is dates have been assigned for the progression of beyond visual line of sight operations in the United States. And that, of course, is one that, depending on how this goes, could create a much broader set of aerial issues. And it's one, the FAA, I think, has been pushing back so that they didn't have to deal with it right away, because the technologies aren't exactly there yet to be able to deal with finding and seeing drones. There's things that are there, but it's not tied into the air system yet.
And it's worth noting that beyond line of sight, it exists now. You can do it. You just have to get an exception for it, which means you can file paperwork and people know and things like that. And the companies went, that's way too much bureaucracy, too much of a hassle. Can we, just do this without having to get an exception to do beyond line of sight? And now the FAA is going to have to do that, which, like Jesse said, that's going to require technologies embedded within the drone and also within aerial platforms of all sorts, including planes, to say, hey, everybody knows where everybody's at.
So that one, I think, is the one that's a little bit more day-to-day impact compared to the other executive order. We'll see how either of them goes. And if you're interested in either, there's a link, of course, in the show note. And, of course, you can find the executive orders themselves and probably the FAA's responses to how they're going to make these things happen somewhere online.
And just like Jesse said to start with, they do address the security question of DJI within the executive order. So look at that stuff because it's a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Detailed, finicky, convoluted, lots of those words.
Yeah. And DJI, of course, responded with, but we are not a Chinese front. So, well, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. And of course, we always talk about DJI, but most of these also generally reference Chinese-built UAVs in general. So keep that in mind as well, even though most of these things talk specifically about if it ever becomes true legislation, it won't just be DJI.
Is there any non-Chinese made, I'm going to say prosumer, for lack of a better term, drones out there? I can't.
There's a couple in the US. And of course, now that I'm thinking about it, I can't think of any of the names, but yeah, there are some. And there's the amusing one that is basically DJI hardware that's being made, quote unquote, by a U.S. company, manufactured in Vietnam, I think, just so it gets around the Chinese thing. But it's still, the hardware is identical to a DJI Mavic, whichever one it was, 3, I think. So, yeah.
Next up in news, Google has released a bunch of new updates for Google Maps, which is, we've covered this so much, Google updates to Maps, that understand this happens frequently, but this is kind of a cool update. It's around helping you travel more sustainably. Right now it's in Europe, almost, I think exclusively it's in Europe, but it's got a lot of neat features in there to help you figure out how to drive or how to bike better, or how to, what things that you can do to save on gas, petrol in the European term, what you can do to help reduce your emissions, when you can be doing things so when you're traveling in low emission zones, you can do things to, help with that. And of course, congestion, which is a huge problem in every city, everywhere, how to how to plan your travel so that you help reduce congestion and the associated environmental costs thereof.
Yeah, this is another Google update that for some reason in my mind, I thought they already had. And it's really good one if you're planning a trip and planning to do a cycle route through any of the cities. So you can avoid heavy car traffic or know when you're going to come up on some steep hills.
Barb, I have to say I'm with you on that one because when I saw it originally, I thought you could get some of the stuff, but I must have gotten it somewhere else. Or
Yes, you could get some of the stuff, but now they've integrated.
Is that what it is? Yeah. So, but good. It hopefully rolls out everywhere.
I think the big thing that brought it all together is that they're using AI now to help you with that planning and the routing and all that sort of stuff like that, taking these things into consideration within the AI, which is simultaneously really cool and frightening at the same time. Because anyway.
And finally in the news, a new launch this past week for the Sony PlayStation, right? We don't often talk about gaming consoles, but this launch is for an interactive platform, free to download if you have Sony PlayStation 5. It's called Climate Station. So it's an interactive, kind of immersive visualization of climate data. And one of the features is sort of looking at a year and the climate. So it utilizes a lot of remote sensing and all kinds of stuff. But it's just, again, cool to see these types of resources come out to highlight issues and, in our area that we're familiar with, but for a broader audience. So I've actually tried it out. It's made with a common tool, Unity, that we've talked about on the podcast before. And supposedly, although I've not tried this yet, you can also use it on the PlayStation VR too. So a limited audience, limited by the hardware and technology, but really great to see this tool come out and get added to the ways that we can visualize climate and share that knowledge with others.
It's one of those things where it will probably come to Oculus and desktop and those type of things as well, because it does have a traditional 2D screen based as well as the potential for VR. But it's weird because it uses levels. So you have to progress through a series of content before you can begin to explore content.
I think they set it up kind of like a tutorial in kind of a way, which you can do.
But again, that's a very levels-based approach to it. So it's just kind of interesting to have a levels-based approach to scientific communication.
It feels like maybe teachers made this. First, you have to pass this class before you can take that class.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the cool things about it is the visualizations are really nice, but, I can imagine, like, when I teach a class on this and using Unity, I ask the students to come up with a topic. This is something that topic-wise I could see even my classes go, hey, let's make something that helps spread, information about what's going on with climate. So the makers of it do hope that will be a learning tool. So again, right now, a limited release to just the PlayStation Store and PlayStation 5. But I think that it's something that more broadly, with being created with something like Unity, there is the cross-platform ability. So, but yeah, the partnership that created it included the Department of Meteorology at the University of Reading in the UK, Berkeley Earth, and the Playing for the Planet Alliance. So I don't know. I thought it was really cool. Again, available for free and tried it out. So
as long as you have a PlayStation.
You say available for the cost of one PlayStation.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting first, because although I've made quite a bit of applications with Unity, I've never seen actually their interface or how they do stuff for the PlayStation. So, but hey, you have to have developer licenses, all that kind of stuff. So I didn't have access to those things. So anyway.
A scientist, I believe, at Carnegie Mellon University, that's where the article originated from, has created a interactive map, and it is a science communication tool to encourage scientists to do a science homecoming. That is to go to their local papers, their hometown papers, wherever they're from, and to educate the people there on a local level, a local scale, about what it is they do. And they're calling the interactive project the Science Homecoming. And I thought it was a really interesting idea because it basically brings the idea of science communication and talking local, but gives you a tool now that you can use to make it a little bit more efficient to reach out to these small local papers.
This is something that we got emails as AAG members 2-3 months ago to kind of push this as well. So it's been making its rounds for a few months now, and it is a response to all of the cuts that have been happening in all the federal cuts in the United States, especially, but just general trends that we have going on now that there's a lot more misinformation about not just details, but also about what we do as academics or professionals or whatever you want to define yourself as. Those misunderstandings are growing. So it's kind of a way of trying to get our voices out there ourselves, as opposed to waiting for somebody to come and ask to do an article about us, I think.
And what's interesting about it is some of the examples talk about how a lot of scientists and researchers, their work comes from what they experienced growing up in their hometowns. So it makes sense to bring what you've done back to the place that influenced you in the research that you're doing.
So we're happy to be joined today by Zach Jaffe, who is the founder and CEO of Map IT. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It was nice to meet you at the North Carolina GIS conference. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to sit down then, but today I just wanted to kind of go through those same type of questions, and starting with, tell us a little bit about Map IT and where you're located and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So Map IT, we are based in Charleston, South Carolina, but we work all over the country and have actually had a couple projects overseas as well. So we're really a geospatial consulting firm focused on infrastructure mapping. We also are a licensed land surveyor, so we do that side of the geospatial world as well. And that's just the more traditional, hey, I'm building building a fence. Where's my property line? Or we're adding an addition to the house. We need a tree and topo survey. So that's one side of the business. And the other side, the more kind of, newer age geospatial consulting is the infrastructure mapping. Well, where we will do everything from going out and collecting data through reality capture, LiDAR laser scanning. We do CAD drawings or 3D BIM modeling, and really take that all the way through to GIS deliverables. A lot of our focus has been on interior mapping or indoor mapping, a relatively new term in the GIS world. And really the focus on that has been in the K through 12 school district space, higher education, campuses, and we're working on a couple museum projects as well. So that's really been our focus. And, we've seen a lot of success in it the past 2 years, and we're really continuing to see it grow, or those types of services needed, really.
And you kind of touch on three different areas in just that quick introduction. One being the traditional 2D, let's make a map of something or a CAD drawing of something, moving into the 3D with some of the creation of models to support that 2D, but also then getting into the reality capture where you're then moving into point clouds and all that means. So a lot of different things to touch on there. So whenever you are looking at a project, I think to completely go off the topics that I had discussed with you before, how do you begin to think about, okay, this is our more traditional 2D points, get a GPS, get a total station out there, versus we need to get out there with a laser scanning system. So what kind of guides you with that?
Absolutely. Obviously, it's very project dependent, but, most times it comes down to, is it interior or exterior mapping, or a combination of both? So for example, if we're focusing on indoor mapping for a K through 12 school district, where they're creating maps for, interactive maps for safety and security, critical incident mapping, emergency response, right? Not going to really use, traditional land surveying techniques in that scenario, right? Because it's all or mainly indoor mapping. You're going to use LiDAR laser scanners to create those point clouds. We do go around the exterior of the school as well to, map the entire site, traditionally using LiDAR land surveying, LiDAR technology as well, because we're already there doing that type of work. Every now and then we do come across projects where, hey, we really need to make sure, we tag that valve. And sometimes, though, that smaller information can be harder to extract from point clouds. While it is usually visible, we do like to kind of double verify those kind of features. So we will go back out with, GPS or traditional land surveying equipment to locate those. Another example of a project I'm working on right now is a cemetery mapping project, where we're actually going out and collecting the locations of headstones, as well as documenting, what the site looks like by taking a picture. And one of the questions, I was toying with the idea of, do we want to use our LiDAR scanning technology that captures 360 panoramic imagery, or do we want to go the traditional route of, GPSing every headstone and taking a picture all through, various Esri applications? we actually decided to go the traditional route just because we thought the LiDAR probably is a little bit of overkill for a more basic 2D map deliverable. And in terms of the time efficiency, we felt like it was the same. So that was one kind of project. We're like, well, which one do we want to go here?
And it's always, you start with that to get it done and have it there. And if the client wants you to come back and scan the headstones to get the inscriptions and things that, as you know, whenever you're looking at headstones, they wear down over time. And LiDAR does a great job of helping to kind of pull out those details that are lost a lot of times visually. So yeah, I mean, it's having those different deliverables as options later on is always a great option as well. And kind of talking about then going back from the point clouds to a more traditional product, because the point cloud and the 3D models that you can create from that, the reality capture, is great for looking at in a game engine or those type of environments. But not all clients have that capability or desire to be able to move around. They want a more traditional product. So can you talk a little bit about that process of going back from this very dense, high resolution, high content point cloud to a more generalized 3D model or 2D model?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what it all comes down to, right, is what the end user, what our client wants to visualize. Oftentimes, point clouds can be overkill in terms of what you're capturing, right? Because the way LiDAR scans works, it captures everything the eye sees, whether or not that's something that's going to be included in your final data set, right? So if we're creating just standard floor plans, it's going to capture the detail of everything in that room, furniture, lighting, whatever your eye can see, the scanner is going to pick up, and that's going to be in the point cloud. Now, oftentimes we will simplify that by just extracting only what's required for that project and then delivering it to them, like you said, in either a 2D CAD or a 3D BIM, oftentimes through GIS. I will say that with a lot of these, software integrations and partnerships, specifically, between Autodesk and Esri, as well as all the cloud-based solutions, it's becoming a lot easier to deliver these, higher and heavier data set deliverables to clients through those cloud systems. So, prior to a lot of these workflows, delivering a BIM model to a client that wasn't an architect or an engineer was unheard of, or even a point cloud. But now with those integrations through easy to use web browsers, I can send you a link of an extremely detailed BIM model or point cloud that just gives you more access to more information that you already paid for. So while at the end of the day, yes, all you need is those 2D plans, you can now access that higher resolution imagery point cloud or BIM model through hosted web browsers. So it is slowly starting to change, and I think that that's helping a lot of organizations kind of maybe not better understand the process and workflow, but get more out of the project, get a higher ROI, or even be able to expand the solution to other departments within an organization.
Yeah, having that generalized content, it's a good place for the client to start because they know this is what they need, this is what they want. But then having access to those additional data through Fusion's 360 or Web Scene Viewer and ArcGIS Online, just like you're saying, just makes it a little bit deeper for them, gives them that extra information. If they need more things pulled out that they can see in it, they know to come back to you and talk about those type of things.
Exactly.
So whenever we're looking at this wealth of technologies, you've been in the field since before the closer integration between the AEC on the Autodesk side and the GIS and various tools on the Esri side. Can you talk a little bit about your feelings about this thing that happened? What was it, about 3-4 years ago now, where Autodesk and Esri said, we're going to not just let people do loose coupling between our products, we're going to intentionally go through and work together to make these workflows a little bit more seamless.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's great. Clearly there was a need for it in the industry and they saw that opportunity. I think it was like at this point, maybe like 6 years ago that they announced their official partnership. Now, there had always been a little bit of interoperability between the two, but not really to the extent, of course, that we're seeing now. Clearly there was the need for it. They saw the opportunity. Yeah, so that really, I mean, I think it's allowing, like I mentioned also earlier, it's allowing a lot more people to benefit from these solutions and softwares that previously only architects and engineers used BIM, right? Used really BIM and Revit and those suite of tools. In the GIS world, never really touched that. Or not even the GIS world, right? A facility manager who's busy maintaining a school or facility never would have used a 3D model in an app on their phone. But now they can quickly say, okay, where is that asset in that pump room that I need to locate and fix? And what are those what are the attribute informations about that pump? What's the make? What's the model? The ID number, right? Now they have that access through that integration. So it's really expanding the use of these data sets. And I also think that before my time in land surveying or GIS, right? GIS and land surveying and CAD all kind of started at the same place. Then over the years, they really separated and diverged to where, like, the land surveyors joke about GIS is GIS stands for get it surveyed. I don't think that's very fun, But now we're starting to see the worlds are kind of coming back together, right? We're saying, hold on, land surveyors can use GIS can use land surveying data. And I think the integrations of AutoCAD and Esri are kind of really amplifying that these worlds do work together. GIS is not totally separate from these CAD softwares, and that you can actually benefit by using them both together, and both land surveyors and GIS professionals are benefiting from it. And now that world's kind of getting mixed for the better.
Yeah, I think there's two technologies that did this weird, and I'm not sure how recent to really point it to, but beginning to bring them back together. On the one hand, you have the use of GPS or GNSS in general that was a heavy thing for GIS users to take advantage of, but there was just this point where one day you're watching surveyors with total stations, the next day everybody's out there with a GPS unit. And I think that begins to change some of that mentality. And on the other hand, it's going back to the reality capture, the movement into digital twins, which of course is also what precipitated the connection, that stronger connection between Autodesk and Esri. Just that the idea of BIM in general just really began to bring these together. And so in my mind, these are two things that kind of began to bring them together at different stages, but it just, like you're saying, it brought this idea of where we started together, moved apart, and now are kind of reflexively kind of coming back together, began.
Yeah. No, I mean, I completely agree. I think we're right. Digital twin was a pretty big driving factor because everyone wants a digital twin now.
Yeah. And if only we could get the as-built as they were actually built. But that's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole other story. I'm working on a project right now where they keep saying, as-built code because, it's more design, and whatever happened after that is,
the last thing you see is
a problem we're trying to solve now.
Yeah, you see the architect's CAD drawing or BIM, and you're like, okay, well, how does that connect to reality? But that's like you're saying. So then let's jump into those digital twins and how you're utilizing this, especially like you were saying, for these smart campuses that you've been working with.
Yeah, so the common misconception, right, digital twin is like a 3D model, when that's a component of the digital twin. Really, digital twin, is the real world conditions in the digital environment. So that is the visualization of something and the attribute information of what something is, right? So if I'm looking at a pipe, I can see the pipe. I know what system it's involved with. I know when it's installed. I know the make, as well as, we're talking about a pump, being able to pull in sensors associated with that pump, to understand, the flow, being able to pull that into a data set or a dashboard or some type of data visualization platform, right? So that's really what the digital twin is. So a lot of, what we're doing for campuses isn't necessarily like a 3D digital twin, because that might not be necessary for what they're doing. So it's a 2D digital twin where we have, floor plans for buildings, and we have 2D representations of utilities around campus, even, some parking, sidewalks, things of that nature, right? But all that information is tied in to, a system of record, whether it's an asset management system or work order management system, or even third-party integrations. For example, we're working on a project now where we're mapping out parking lots at a museum. So each parking lot has a feature, so we can get a count of parking spaces, square footage of parking spaces, and it's actually tied to a camera that knows when someone's parked there, when they're not. So now we have, to use this example again, a parking digital twin for this museum, for example, where ultimately they're going to know what parking spots are available, what art, that's going to be symbolized in red. They can see, is that an accessible parking spot, electric vehicle parking, or just a standard parking spot? So those are, that's just a simple example of a 2D digital twin. Well, on the flip side, we work with a lot of water and wastewater treatment facilities, right? Where if you've ever been to a treatment facility or seen pictures of it or seen plans of it, right, there's piping layered on top of each other going every which way. And it is nearly impossible to decipher the meaning of that data in 2D, right? You really need a 3D digital twin for that kind of information where you can zoom in, pan around, and really see how that piping system works or how it connects. And then again, being able to tie that information to real-time information, through IoT sensors or other, like I mentioned, third-party systems like work order or asset management.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't think about, one, of course, like you're saying, the sensors and the real-time reflective, I guess is a better word, nature of digital twins, but also just the sheer amount of networking data that also goes into this, because understanding what's going on at one sensor, you then need to understand the routing upstream and downstream for, say, the water treatment of, what's going on with that pipe above and below, and how do other sensors reflect what this one sensor may be saying is an error. So yeah, it's just this combination of network and sensors that I don't think, like you're saying, a lot of people think about. We think about the representation of the world, whether in 2D or 3D, but not that real-time nature that a true digital twin should be.
Right. And then on top of that, it's like the predictive analytics in some situations too. That kind of just builds on that. Yeah. I mean, talking about kind of the real-time sensors and predictive analytics. I mean, another example is a water wastewater treatment plant. We're evaluating a project right now. We've done some scanning and BIM modeling for that, where they want to use an Autodesk product, Autodesk Tandem, as their digital twin platform. I mean, Tandem's an Autodesk product, cloud-based, really is a digital twin platform, right? It integrates with a lot of third-party systems, real-time sensors, and they want that to be their kind of centralized data repository of all treatment plant asset information. But they don't love the way that these models can be distributed through the Autodesk platforms to the organization. So they're looking at an integration with Esri and GIS to distribute that information as an alternative. So that's just a great example of, using an Autodesk product for full digital twin, looking at, integrating IoT sensors, predictive analytics, everything in Autodesk, while distributing the model through Esri and GIS to their field technicians who know the Esri and GIS world, not the Autodesk world. So that's kind of a good example of, your digital twin question, and going back to your questions about, these Autodesk and Esri and other software integrations.
Now, another thing that you work on heavily, and kind of touching back to some of the smart campus facilities, is indoor mapping. And your organization is a partner, an Esri partner, with ArcGIS Indoors as well. Can you talk a little bit about how all of these things kind of feed into how you're working with Indoors?
Yeah, so ArcGIS Indoors is a specific product of the Esri ecosystem. It's really like an extension of ArcGIS Pro, desktop applications, and ArcGIS Online. So ArcGIS Indoors is just a really good way to kind of use GIS as a centralized data repository for, your indoor, but really campus information. I always say it should be called ArcGIS Campus because oftentimes we're not just mapping indoors, we're mapping entire sites, entire campuses. So it's a really good way to give tools to facility managers, safety and security teams, space planners, even students or visitors, right? Give them access to specific floor plan information that they need, right? So it's, in like the asset management world or facility management world, it's find it, fix it, right? Where is it and what is it so I can fix it, right? But really, it's just tools that allow you to find things quickly and efficiently, whether it is a new student on a campus that needs to navigate to a classroom, or it's a first responder who needs to respond to an event and know where is that event taking place, what's the nearest entrance exit, what safety and security aspects are there, right? So ArcGIS Indoors is just a really great product that Esri's put out to support a lot of those use cases.
And just kind of to broaden out a little bit more, we've used the term facility management, and it's one that is very important, especially for the facility managers, but it's one that I think in the 90s, whenever I was starting, there was a lot more conversations about facilities management and GIS, and it kind of went away in the early 2000s. but I feel that with the movement towards BIM and those type of things, that it's really come back, but it just hasn't had that same conversation point that it once had. So can you talk a little bit more about just this idea of facilities management in general that you've been working with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think facility management has not been a spatial application for a long time, right? So it's people have great facility management softwares, EAM softwares, and it's just a record in the spreadsheet, more or less, obviously through, an application. And, you might have a field that has that location, locational information, but it's not on a map, right? Maps are very easy to understand. Looking at hundreds of rows in a table, or even just one row in a table, you don't quite understand as much. So, we're building that connectivity of understanding and allowing facility managers and maintenance crews to really understand contextually, what it is they're working with, and just an easier way to find and fix it.
Yeah, I think in the 90s, like I was saying, whenever there was a lot of conversation about it, it was the CAD line work and, the little bit of attribution that you can do with the different layers in CAD. And this whole other document, like you're saying, an Excel sheet or database that you then had to go to once you figured out which line, you'd go then look up that line number in the data table. And there was just this disconnect. And a lot of it, I think, we lost a lot of the spatial information as people ignored the CAD eventually and focused more on the table. But yeah, it's great seeing that coming back together over the last decade or so and seeing a lot more work.
Yeah, now it's like, hey, I get on my phone, I get an alert. I got a work order in that room. I can view the room, view the work order, see what assets are in that room, click on that point, and then my work order system will show me what that asset information was, what that record is in that table, right? All in that one location.
Yeah, and we're seeing that on our campus where we have slowly seen more of the electricians, more of the folks that are working with network and water being there with their phones with our campus facilities and utility map, so they can say, whenever they get a call, go find this line, they can say, okay, well, this is where this line is, like you're saying.
And yeah, it's not just internal facility.
Yeah.
Managers and teams, right? It's working with outside contractors who come to a campus and say, I don't know this campus, and being able to distribute this information through, mobile apps and web apps as well.
And on top of that, we have our facilities is also involved with the 811 calls for a certain distance from our campus. So they love that. So yeah, it like I said, it is good to see more movement back into the facilities management within the GIS space as we're moving forward.
Well, I was just saying, going back to your original question, talking about ArcGIS Indoors and how this plays a part. I think it's a really cool kind of workflow to achieve, indoor mapping or smart campus mapping, right? Because it does involve all of these technologies. And oftentimes, we get questions when we're doing implementations or starting the implementation conversation of how do we get there? Oftentimes we have scans, PDFs, that we're hand-drawn of the facility when it was built 100 years ago, right? We can take that, we can digitize it, we can bring it into the workflow. You can go out there and, perform reality capture with LiDAR laser scanning and create the content from point clouds. It can be 2D, 3D. So there are a lot of, routes to go to achieve, kind of these smart campus initiatives with indoor mapping. So it really ties on everything we're talking about together because it does involve reality capture, CAD, BIM, GIS, asset management systems, full digital twin.
And it's good that we have organizations such as yours that are willing to take it on.
Appreciate it. No, it's fun, important work. We enjoy doing it.
Now we've focused on a few of the things that you guys do. Is there anything else you kind of want to highlight about what Map IT works on? Yeah,
absolutely. So one of the newer things we started to do in-house now is, started to build a lot more custom tools. And we saw a need for that. While there are a lot of great Esri tools out there and CAD tools already, we were finding, on some of our large scale deployments, working with hundreds of schools at a time, finding little things that weren't quite there that need to be tweaked to be perfected for our clients. So we started to do a lot more custom GIS developer work, which has been great. And we've been doing them both in CAD as well as GIS. So that capability has really allowed us to kind of enhance this full digital twin workflow and ArcGIS Indoor workflow that we're providing to our clients. We've got a lot of good positive feedback. So that's been something we've thoroughly enjoyed doing as of late.
What is the best way for people to find out more about Map IT?
Yeah, absolutely. And so funny you said Map IT, Map It. That was kind of kind of the play on words when we came up with a name a while back. We map IT because it's it's got that IT word in it, it's fresh, but you can also say we map it. So it's funny you said that. But people definitely reach out to us through our website. My contact information's on there. I love talking about this stuff, so I'm connecting on LinkedIn, through email. We are pretty active on LinkedIn, so we post frequently about what we're doing, what we've been working on. So by any of those means, we'd be happy to connect.
Okay. Well, thanks for your time today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
On to the Events Corner. As always, go out, visit events, find out new information, but of course, more importantly, talk to people in the hallways, at lunch, wherever.
The State of the Map 2025 is taking place October 3rd through the 5th in the Philippines in Manila.
Spatial Data Science Conference, SDSC 2025, is taking place October 14th through 15th in New York City.
Of course, if you'd like us to add your event to the podcast, send us an email to podcast@veryspatial.com.
If you'd like to reach us individually, I can be reached at sue@veryspatial.com.
I can be reached at barb@veryspatial.com.
You can reach me at frank@veryspatial.com.
And I'm available at Kinda Spatial. And of course, you can find all of our contact information over at veryspatial.com/contact.
As always,
We're the folks from VerySpatial.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Drinking water from the garden hose, acting like we're 6 years